I want to start by saying, Lisa, that a long time ago I read an article, I think in the Harvard Business Review, a very revered magazine, um, that by an essay by a guy who said that Michael Dell was more inventive than Steve Jobs because he changed the process, not the product. And the process of buying, because Dell pioneered buying online and a bunch of stuff like that, which I thought was fascinating because it's harder to get excited to explain about a process than it is about a product, leading to which you have quite an innovative, interesting bookstore. But what's absolutely fascinating is the place it holds in the community. And I guess what you call it's the trunk of the tree, and it's the whole tree that's fascinating. Um, so do you want to start out maybe by talking a little bit about how you got involved very briefly with Franklin Fixtures and how that led to starting an experimental bookstore to support it in a way?
Yeah, let me see how I can do this quickly. Um, Dave and I fell in love and we wanted to do something big for the world. And when we finally married in 2013, um, we wanted to do two things. One, help our communities grow and prosper and experience equality. Always cared deeply about literacy. Um, so we set out on an adventure to find we had just closed a manufacturing company because the only thing less likely to survive in this country than an independent bookstore is probably a small manufacturing company. Uh, but we believe that manufacturing, making things with your hands, is an important part of the fabric of our economy, and just psychologically, it's a good thing. So we looked for and found a company. And then when we found Franklin Fixtures, it was going to close. It was in Cape Cod, formed in 1974, and it was dedicated to bookshops, which I fell in love with, and Dave did too. So we thought this is our way of participating in the book industry and in helping our country in the biggest way we can think of. So we moved that to Tennessee in 2015 as an economic and started working with two recovery houses where we help people recover their lives, and they're so proud of what they're making and everything that they're helping people connect with books. So what that gave me was this great seat, a privileged seat, if you will, that where I get to see um, all these bookstores. It's over 15,000 bookstore projects at this point, but I've looked at hundreds of them in depth, and I've learned from each of them. In COVID, we had one customer that wasn't able to complete their order because of COVID and lease restrictions. So we had a kind of a story problem. We had these fixtures that were made but couldn't be bought, and that would have been devastating for our little manufacturing company. And we decided that was the right time to start a bookshop. So 2 years ago, we planted a bookshop. And what we've also known is that a lot of our friends and clients across the country are grappling with different models of sustainability. So some of them have hybrid models where they're a nonprofit with a bookshop. And we wanted to explore how folks like City Lights and others could benefit by being a full nonprofit. And we discovered there wasn't a place in the IRS code for a bookstore. So we set about kind of changing that. So we planted that at this bookstore as a full nonprofit, um, for the sake of booksellers across the country who need that option. So we're actually actively working on cultivating what does a full nonprofit look like, and how does that model work, and how do you get IRS support for it. And then we also wanted to apply some of the best practices and really use this as an experimental space for the sake of our country's booksellers, while also deeply impacting our community, and our community partners that we care about, because books help everything. So we established this bookshop as a nonprofit 2 years ago, and have moved once and are getting ready to move once more, to what has been our aim or our best spot all along. It'll be across the street, but right now we're in 1,100 square feet, in the center of Cookeville, Tennessee. And Cookeville is a deep red spot in the map, in a state where reading has been, well, books are being distrusted, and there's limitations and such. So we have to proceed with caution in order to build the trust with the schools and the libraries and all that. That's kind of a
Yeah,
10,000.
and I think it's important to not only look at some of the innovations that you've applied from the teaching that you've done with a little bit of support from me, but also um, to look at the model behind it, the process behind it, and the fact that number one, your factory and your bookstore are nonprofits, both of them, right? And and one of the things that most people don't know is that I think a majority of your, or at least half of your employees, 50, 60 employees in the factory are ex-felons who are your best employees, you told me.
Yes,
And so,
they're
so
great.
there's a whole mission thing going on here that you're rocking the mission in a way that a lot of people aren't. But so one thing, because you advise a lot of bookstores, obviously, and you've learned, as you explained to me, you've learned a lot from that, watching them. Um, h- how do you deal with the fact that most bookstores are nonprofits, even though they're not officially labeled that? And how do you capitalize on the nonprofit nature, even if it's mostly a mission-driven bookstore?
It's an interesting question. Well, I
This
think that,
goes to your question of privilege. I mean, in a way, I could say, well, you're privileged. You have this big business to run. You can cash on the cash flow. Brad and Tom and some of the other people on this don't have that advantage. How do you answer
well,
that?
I think the only problem with is not being aware of what privilege we have, and we all have. I mean, Dave and I started Franklin Fixtures. We had $60,000 in savings, which seemed like a lot at the moment. It was gone in less than a week, and had the help of a SBA 504, and then we closed 28 other loans, and just been really scrappy in never giving up on this idea. The For the bookshop, the privilege I have principally is that I get to see so many other bookshop models, and I get to see what's working. And I'm a bit of a researcher, and so I'm looking at like what's really working for people, what creates a sustainable model. Um, Everybody can do, and it's becoming increasingly popular to do a hybrid model where you have a nonprofit entity that is associated with the bookstore, and helps feed some of your nonprofit energies if that's something you want to do. So there's several dozen models that are people that I could point to that are doing that. Story and Song is my favorite to talk about because that's where Donna Pass and Kaufman and Mark Kaufman work and teach out of, and they have a literacy foundation that works alongside their bookstore. So and they found that their community really wanted to support that nonprofit. So they accessed their privilege in that way. They said, I've got this community. What do you have? What are the assets that you have? And in our community, we have a lot of people who are doing good things. And so rather than compete with that or trying to reinvent that, we're like, how can we help your good thing? And how can we, synergize, create a little flywheel so that everything is flying together? So we have a board with 28 people. It's an advisory board. Even a for-profit entity could have an advisory board, and it's a way of um, engaging the community and the stakeholders. And because of those stakeholders, we're making, um, we have a little coloring book that was a chamber project. We have, and we're going to get that coloring book, Oh, the Places You Could Work, out to 11,000 first graders. And we're going to be able to gift those first graders when they complete it with a free book of choice, one of 8 books. We're funding that with community help and support. And so it all kind of works together. Does that answer your question, Steve? Is that
Yeah, yeah. One that we do, let's do this. Why don't you talk a little about what's special about the physical store that you obviously used your design and psychology background for, and then let's talk about the tree and the trunk, the limbs of the tree. Let's talk about the trunk first. So if you want, and I've forgotten who's operating the camera. Sam, right? It's operating the camera. You guys can get up and walk around and show us things that you think are good lessons you've learned.
Well, one of the things that and we can do that. We've got customers in the store.
We can ask them. We can interview them.
We- So most of our customers that come in actually in this particular store are number one, identify themselves not really as readers much. And we have a lot of people who are visiting town. So we see a lot of new people all the time. And we like talking about skimmers, dippers, and divers. And the idea that skimmers are just kind of checking things out, and dippers are looking for a present or looking for something, and divers, they're ready to stay the day and really get into books. And I like asking people which audience they're getting. Probably 60% skimmers, 20% divers. That's Sam, you think you're nodding a little bit. We did it.
Yeah.
We did the course, and that was sort of the consensus.
I play more divers on the weekends, but more skimmers during the week.
Skimmers during the
So
week.
how do you, what's your secret? Because I know the bookstore is doing well. What's your secret of dealing with skimmers?
Well, that's where storytelling and display is what it's all about. When you go to a museum, you expect the whole thing to be a connected story. When you come into a small bookshop, the whole thing should feel like a connected story, not like a departmental store. So we have candles, but they're all over the place. We have puzzles, but they're all over the place, and they're integrated in ways that make sense with the story and the flow. So when people come in, they immediately, they naturally go to the right. And when they go to the right here, we'll show that in a second. They go to the staff picks and they see other things that we're reading.
Can you pan over to that? Can Sam pan over to that?
You pan over there? So like she's panning very slowly.
That's good. She's following my orders.
There she goes. So that's where the ladder is where the staff picks are. And then we have and going around, Sam.
Do you want me to just walk it as you
just
describe it?
Yeah, walk over there. Yeah.
So we just over here is just, I mean, this is pretty standard. Everybody has staff picks, but it's the idea. Let's back up a little bit.
But you put it to the first place to the right, which is key to bookstore traffic, right?
Right. Because when people come in, they automatically go to the right. And we also have shelving protocols, and that is we try to keep the shelf really full. We try to do 2 to 3 face outs per shelf. If you kind of move down this way and look at the shelf, 2 to 3. We never end the row with a face out because it's like a sentence that doesn't have a period. We never break the author from shelf to shelf, and we try to look at kind of almost like an S pattern that people are going to see because people see face outs, because this is all about discovery. What we're doing here is trying to create a place for discovery. So it's radically different than going online or doing something else. You're going to see something that maybe you haven't seen before. Let's go down in here. So this is all fiction. So we kind of start in fiction. And as you pan around, you get we have interesting people. We have displays all the way through, but there's a large children's area. And let's walk that. Yeah. This little seat right here is probably the most popular seat in this house. So everybody sits there and wants to live in that space. Let's move on down. Like right now with the Emmys, we're doing kind of like the Plenties. So we had our own Emmy-like awards this week. So these are the books that won the Plenties, and that's kind of a fun thing. And
you have Goodnight Moon in Spanish.
Yes, we do, and we have a Spanish shelf now, and some things there. This is the children's area, which is like let's look at this one here. So here you see the integration of plushes with things. So here you've got classic children's literature. We've got hatchlings and then nestlings and fledglings, which is our way of talking about children at various stages. But you can see in every display, there's integration like this one. And our shelf talkers are really personal. It's important that we not give a book report, but fairy tales don't teach children that dragons exist. Children already know this. Fairy tales teach children dragons can be defeated. Just got a little thing there. This is so little short shelf talkers and little short things. Placement, of course, like
Because I was looking for something cinnamony, and they normally have sort of, all right, same one. I've had a muffin there.
Hey, Liz, can you turn your sound off? Thank you.
I've had one in the past that's just sort of like a cinnamon something. This one was like sour.
Hey, Liz, can you mute your sound? Maybe I'll mute it. See if I can get it.
It was
There.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please. Sorry.
So, face outs are just incredibly important. So you'll see face outs everywhere and integrated display. We have this particular shelf because it's a good way to see a lot of face out books at once, and things do move. And it goes from children into Right now we have, what is this display, Sam?
This is kind of our fall harvest, I kind of think, and then it kind of fades into Halloween. I feel like we start with fall and then fade into spooky season.
And Sam and Lisa, are you constantly changing the display?
Constantly. Yes. Like you shouldn't walk in here 2 weeks in a row and see the same. Really. But like this is a cookbook of, well, as you pan back here, this is middle readers here. Middle readers.
Early chapter, middle readers, advanced middle readers, and then into YA.
And the integration of games, games and science collections with books on Geeking Out. So integration is really important so that you're not looking at any display where you're not seeing both books and other things. Usually over here, we have, this is all young adults. So love the show, love the book. We have little shelf talkers that each person writes, and we're really challenging ourselves to get better at shelf talkers. That is to write things that are personal and compelling, really, really good copy. And we're not always hitting that mark yet, but we're working on it. This is our small business area, but you get.
Hey, Lisa.
Yeah.
You also, maybe you should talk about the basics of your shelves, because you had the advantage of, being able to order the shelves that you want, and the tilt up at the bottom and the tilt down to top and stuff like that.
That's really important. And it's hard to feel in this environment, but as you're standing, you can feel it in your gut. When you lift something up, when you sit at the right angle, you feel it in your gut. I mean, like all the way in your gut. So things will sell from the bottom if you can see them from the top, and if they really hit your eye. Right here, and this is a problem here, we're working on ways to get this into the light, because things don't sell in the shadows.
I think of it like a sunflower. Your face should be the sun, the book should be the sunflower. The book should always be looking directly at your face.
That's what Samantha says, and that's right. She thinks of it like a sunflower. that the book should always be looking at your face.
You need the angle of the shelf to always affect your face.
Yeah. So it's hard to
That's true at the bottom even, right?
It's true at the bottom. These shelves are tipped already at the bottom. So the very bottom one is tipped. But you can tip these at any level because they're T-shelves. So they're made with a back that lets them tilt without damaging the books on the back. So that's a superpower that we use of these to try to do. And the way I've done that with staff is kind of going around and saying, okay, stand in front of the bookshelf, and when you feel it, tell me. And that's when it's the right angle, because we can feel it. It's very hard to explain or show, but easier to do. So I'm standing up and you can see these books from where I'm standing because of the angle, and you can see what's on the bottom.
And I assume that lighting is just, as a former film gaffer, lighting is just as important as display.
Lighting is extraordinarily important, and lighting in this store has been incredibly challenging. we have maxed out what we can do on our lights. We're moving across the street over the next months, and lighting is our very first consideration. Lighting in the shelves, on the shelves, because when you light from these strip lights that we've got, you get shadows. You get, so that's not ideal in the space. So we're experimenting with different lighting and different things. We've got sconces, but actually we've now got some fixtures that have light in them. But it has to be soft light. There's a quality of light. So like a 3000K, 4000K, really warm light is more important than getting like, we're replacing the 2x2 fluorescence with actually a 2x2 LED that we can put into 3000K, and we can put on a dimmer, and we can make it broadcast light that really work. But that's a whole workshop.
No, that's
light
fascinating. Yeah.
and lighting. So if you come over here, see, there's like this is an example of one of the things we're trying to do is really promote creators and creativity, writing and handwriting, hand gifting, giving with cards. We have a lot of locally made cards. The cards are kind of worked in here with everything else so that, but they're near the POS. But cards are an important part of margin because the more they have a good margin, and I think every book should come with a card. So, but we've also done the writer's piece. So we have the black wing pencils, and you can see over here, Sam gets this, that there's a lot of people writing on this and experimenting with their black wing pencils. That most people don't know what those are. And Steve, you probably could hold yours up. Because everybody, but that's part of the education process. It's kind of elevated. We have stamp.
And Lisa, that, not to go too macro, but that comes from your focus on gifting and reading, and focusing on non-readers and turning them into readers, and dealing with the fear and guilt that people have about not reading, and that whole. So why don't you explain a little about that?
Well, I mean, the first thing to figure out is like, who are you serving? Who is our client base? So we've done a lot of work on persona and really defining who that person is that and so if we don't want to exist in our town for the 20% of people who have been in bookstores before, but for the 80% of people that have not stepped foot in a bookstore in at least the last decade. And that's most of America. So how do we get most of America in a bookstore? And we've got 3 in 10 adults that can't read to a child. They're our audience. They're the people that we're trying to engage in reading. How are they going to get engaged? Well, somebody's going to gift a book, or they're going to make it to one of our events. And we held 320 events last year. So they're going to go to a children's event. They're going to watch their child get read to. Maybe they're going to get into a wordless book. But to your question, we're trying to really hone in on who are we serving, and then curate for that audience. And part of the audience, we've discovered over 400 local authors since we moved here have approached us and said, I'm writing a book, or I want to write a book. So that's a creative act that we want to feed. So while we're serving this,
how are you dealing with those with
well, we have write-ins monthly, in the shop where people can come and write. We have workshops monthly for writers and publishers. We have a NaNoWriMo we participate in during the month of November, which everybody can do, and that's write-ins in the evenings. And then all along the way, we've had people like Ruby Zapetti's and her You the Story. This whole shelf is really about how to be a great writer, and this is a book that we sell a lot, and she's fantastic. But also the Storyteller's Handbook is wonderful. So this is all about telling your story, because that's what everybody needs to do. That's one of the best ways to engage in reading, is for people to engage with their own story. And if they're going to write it in a little notebook, or if they're going to use fancy pens, or if they're going to get a book on animals, that's a watercolor workbook, anything that inspires their own storytelling, it helps them get people into reading. So that's one of the ways we like to think of this. You asked about the trunk and the tree. So this bookshop is like a tree trunk, but Plenty is like a tree. So out of the tree are branches. So we've got schools and libraries, book clubs on a branch. We've got events. We little plan over town. Got the creative writer and the writing. So we've got 9 branches together. And each of our staff are working on one of those branches and helping cultivate that. So that's our outreach into the community. That makes sense.
Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit about the way you work? I mean, you have a lot of sevens, so tell me if I'm wrong. You have 7 turns in a year, which is extraordinary for a store, right? That's one thing.
Yeah.
Okay. You have 17 employees, I believe. So most of them working an hour or two a week, so it's a wild model. We'll talk about that. And then you have the 7 turns a year. What was it? Oh, and then you gift. Do you gift 1,700 books? Is that what you said to me?
That was last year. Our ambition is to gift more of them, but only with, we don't want to get in the process. We don't want to be giving away books too much in the way that we cheapen books. We want people to have a voucher or to have something that they earn or have it as a prize or have it because we want people to treat books like treasures and be building those home libraries, which are important. Yes, turns are our factory. This hit me when we built this place and we got started putting inventory because we carry a shallow inventory that we want to turn frequently. So it's about 7,500 books is all that we have in here. We have a lot of face outs and we expect them to change constantly. When we, even with 7,500, when we went to pay for, the books in here, I'm like, wow, we have 4 times the inventory costs in this little store than we have in all of Franklin Fixtures, which is making millions of dollars worth of bookshelves and such for people. And it's like, but over there at the factory, we have $23,000 in inventory. We run off of consignment inventory so that we can move fast. We could never afford to have the inventory. And the inventory is the key to bookstore survival, inventory management from a financial standpoint. So the more you can turn, and this is any industry, the more you can turn over your inventory, the better your velocity. So you could even sacrifice some in margin and come out better financially with faster turns. So, and that math is, there's a book called The Mathematics of Bookselling. I think it also reinforces that point. But lean manufacturing, lean healthcare, any of the lean principles reinforce that. So we, as an experiment, said, what would happen if we don't go for 2 to 3 turns, which is typical, but we really go for higher turns. And right now we're tracking at 7. Over in Durango, I think it's Durango, Maria's Bookstore celebrating their 40th anniversary. I learned last week, they're also about 7 turns and they're tracking them by shelf and genre, which is my ambition. I would love to see that because then you can really see what's moving and what's not moving. And if it's not moving, this is a good example. So here we have a display, and as you're coming in, people were kind of stopping and going back the other way. And so we actually asked a customer, what are you looking for? And she said, I'm looking for things that I can pick up and put down. This is a favorite book that I can, easy or beachy read kinds of things. So we had here How to Make Everything, which was kind of fun. It was a beautiful display. But a busy parent is not really interested in how to make everything. A busy parent is interested in what she just described. So we changed this display over so that it was really about these easy connection reads. And boy, has it connected with people. It's really moved like crazy. Sam's nodding in the background. And we've got this time we're doing some color flow with the oranges and the yellows to make it extra attractive. But those are the kind of things that we're constantly, again, the persona, we get busy parents and we get people who are visiting the town. Those are our 2 big personas right now. We want to engage even.
And going back to your turns, so I think you told me on a weekly basis you examine how each genre is doing in inventory.
I was telling you that my aspiration is to do that. Maria's is doing that on a weekly basis, and with great effect. We have not yet achieved that, but that's next. So we're doing it in a estimate way, and it is amazing how often your estimates are correct because we all know it in our guts what's moving and what's not moving. And if something's not moving, the question is why. Is it how it's positioned? Is it how it's it's not being really elevated and sold. We think of these bookshelves like silent sales force. They've got to be selling something. They've got to be positioning it for discovery. And a lot of times really good books don't move simply because of the way they're positioned, or they're in the shadow or whatever. So I think the benefit of being able to look at your turns, we've got anthology and we can do that. And we've been shoring up our genres and what's in, so we know what's in what category. But we know, for instance, our adult fiction moves fastest. Our children's books move pretty fast, especially our picture books. We know for sure our local authors actually move quite well, which is interesting. So we are examining that. But the turns thing is a different way of thinking for bookshops. I'm not ready to say it is the way to do things, but I know it's the way to do things in healthcare. I know it's the way to do things in manufacturing. I know it's the way to do things everywhere else, and it's working so far for us.
That's fascinating. Do you want to talk for a minute about your outside partnerships combined with your multiple employees, which kind of astounds everybody that a small space can have 17 employees, and you actually pay them? Hold on a minute. I'm going to put I think I have your family tree here. Let's see if I can show it. Yeah, there. Brad, can you see that? Can you guys all see that?
Okay, the family tree. You got that as a screenshot from the video.
Yes, I stole it from your video.
Well, we just did a video, which we'll provide after this call, that really captures our staff and our model and why we are. We did it for our gala. We had a gala event, our first ever. We've never done a gala before. It was Three Musketeers Masquerade. And to your question about community partnerships, we had 29 tables sold in the gala, and 11 of them were community nonprofit partners. So we had the library had a table, and then we had our book clubs. Sam's Fantasy Book Club had a table, and our Books and Brews book club had a table, and so we had those community partners. We also have the chamber. We have an advisory board with 28 people on it, which sounds unwieldy. That's not the decision-making board. That's three of us, me, Ashley, and Dave, are the executive board. But the 28 person is divided into 4 committees. And one of those committees is about raising funds, good content. One of them is dedicated to helping us connect to national authors. And one of them is dedicated to helping us connect with other community people who need books, because we believe books can help every cause. So we're trying.
Is there a relation? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is there a relationship? This is fascinating. Is there a relationship between the multiple employees and the multiple partners?
Yes and no. I mean, the multiple employees came about because we have had the privilege of engaging people who care deeply about people, and care and believe that you can care best about people with books, that's one of the really good ways to care. So when we advertised, we've always had this philosophy of making the pie bigger rather than making it smaller. So every time we've hit a financial crunch, instead of the instinct to retract and make everything smaller and count all the pennies, we've made the pie bigger because it makes it more sustainable. So that's why it's a tree. And when we had, I'm not able to be in the bookshop very much at all because of the plant and because of the other responsibilities. So I'm not the model of a person that's able to be here as much as I would. And I don't take anything from the bookshop either, which makes it a different kind of model. But we have others that are and are able. And so when we say we have that many people, we have 2 people who work at a time, and we're open 58 hours, I think, a week. So we're dividing, 58 times 2 over the course of folks. But those folks are also engaged. Tracy is writing a weekly column for our newspaper, and she's also working off of book clubs. Stacy is working on our B2B partnerships, where we're placing books in other businesses with other shelves. So we're doing high interest combinations at the bread shop, at the outdoor store next door, at Glass Tangerine, which is a plant shop. So Stacy's working on that. Ginger's also working on the schools and the libraries and our special events with that. So Jamie's also working on our events, and she and Letty are working on it. So everybody's got, it's not just all in the store hours. Everybody's got basically a P&L related to these different activities that's all feeding the tree. Does that make sense?
What's another couple examples of employees that working on outside, projects and P&Ls that community?
Media.
Well, Eliza's doing our social media. So she's a young woman who's in her senior year in high school, who is an amazing person. She's an amazing bookseller. She's got a lot of insight, and she wanted to partner with Ashley on doing social media. So she is working on storytelling, which is really important in marketing because, again, we're reaching non-readers. We're reaching people who are really living off of social media. So being able to tell a good story and bring them in has been critical. And Eliza's Fresh Take does that. So we go where the energy is. We believe in strengths. So we use the Clifton strengths model to say, what are your strengths and how can we really double down on you working on the thing that's strongest for you? And it sent us in a lot of different directions, but they all feed the core. So every person, we also have, Tracy's a good example. She's a bibliotherapist. She's gotten a advanced certification in that. She is a writer. She has a full-time job, but she loves the bookshop. So she is a real asset when she works in evenings or weekends or on her time during the.
Lisa, how many hours do a couple of those people, what's the range? Like somebody puts in an hour a week, somebody else puts in 20 hours?
Probably the least would be 3 or 4 hours, 3 to 5 hours, and the most would be 30.
And what about your social media high school person? How many hours does she put in?
I think she worked 11 hours last week.
I see. And what do you pay an hour there in book?
Well, it varies a little bit, but our range, and you got to understand where we are in the world. So, but we aim for $15 an hour is kind of our main. We're not here because of the pay, but at the same time, $15 an hour here is $32 in Palo Alto, California. You got to look at your cost of living index. So that's
George is smiling. Yeah.
It's the cost of living index, the COLI really kind of configures. So it's the same as where we start at Franklin. And I will say that people aren't here. We try to pay a fair wage and a good wage. And at the same time, I don't think people are here because of the pay. I think they've got a lot of choices. We're living in a sandsdemic, which means we don't have as many people as we have jobs. That was predicted by the Pew Research Center 30 years ago, and it's true. So it's really extraordinary when we have an opening like we did, 9 months ago, and we say we have 120-hour opening position and we get 70 applicants in 1 hour.
Wow.
And out of those 70 applicants, we did a group interview with 7 and we loved all of them. So we hired all of them and we made the pilot. So but the caveat was, and what Ashley and I have really tried is that we don't want anybody to have less hours because of that. We want people to find, so we're trying to encourage a lot of, and that's still a story thing because a lot of people, they only see or know about there's book staff time, and there's other things, but trying to find those other things that fit everybody is the thing.
So it's a community effort, not only in terms of customers and audience, but in terms of staff and employees too.
Well, for sure. I mean, the staff here, Samantha, who's holding the phone, is amazing at a lot of different kinds of things. And so we're trying to figure out what can you contribute that makes this yours? Because the one thing we never want to have happen is we don't want this to feel like a airport store or a perfect store in some ways. Having protocols for the shelves helps people connect, but it's important for us that every single person shows up here in some kind of physical way. So shelf talkers that are handwritten or personal things. I've got a little cookie jar that was my dad's, when he was a boy, that's in the form of an owl. And we've got an owl thing. We've got a typewriter in the front window that was my grandmother's. Ashley's mouse is on the corner. So we got last week, Stacy brought her dress from home, which was like for the gala, to show off the gala. people, you got to feel every person who's touching this place.
Yeah,
And that,
one of the things that's fascinating about that video, which we will include with this video, is how many people participate in dressing up and parties. And I mean, it's like a party space is anything else. You said you do 320 events a year?
yeah. And those are mostly small events. So,
Those aren't
um,
necessarily author events. They're themed events, right?
well, the author events get a lot of theme. Like we did, I'm thinking of Bomb Shelter with Mary Laura Philpott, and she talks in Bomb Shelter about pimento cheese. So, her event and turtles. We had turtle tablecloths and turtle things, and 3 kinds of homemade pimento cheese, and so every event kind of gets its own theme like that. Jeff Sentner did Colton Gentry's third act, and we had all of the foods that were mentioned in the in the book as available for free, as well as just other kinds of things that create the theme. So Jamie and Letty let their wild creativity fly, as long with everybody else. So it's a party. So our author events are parties, and then we have other parties. Like you were part, Samantha, of the midnight release.
Oh my goodness. Our midnight release parties, hands down, are the best. I was so happy whenever our after the Iron Flame midnight release party, a couple days later, we had some people come in who had went to the Barnes and Noble or the Books a Million midnight release party, and they were so upset because they knew people who came to ours, and they were like, "Yours was so much better. We should have went to yours instead." And I was like, "I could have told you that to begin with. Like, Plenty's where it's at."
That's funny. One of the powers of events is appealing to people who couldn't make it, and later they regret that they couldn't make it, and it drives attention. What what questions does anybody on the call have, or Brad or George or Sarah or anybody? There have been some texts, chats about using a 6x3 book shipping box to tilt books, Lisa, which you can talk to. But what does anybody want to raise their hand or take themselves off mute and ask any questions?
Can you hear me? This is Brad.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I just asked if she would show us where they have their book club and workshop meetings in the store while we're there.
There.
Right here.
It's either here up front or it's in the back. Everything moves, everything's on wheels. So the center area, and Sam, if you stand up, I'll so this center area
Looks so big, Brad, with a wide lens.
Yeah.
So all of this moves. So everything's on wheels. So this moves, out of the way, and we create. And our chairs are in a little bitty thing right there. Chairs come out, pictures go to the side. Those were our bigger events. And then our little events, though, can meet up here in the children's area or up here in the front. In any store, I call it the dead left, because this side of the store,
This is where Romance Book Club meets.
yeah, people don't come here automatically in their path. So this is an area of the store to kind of leave open for gatherings. So kind of thing.
Okay. And how many square feet did you say your store was?
1,100. So
Wow.
we're small, but we're gonna move across the store at 2,400, and I'm super excited because I've been able to really create what my dream
Do you want to talk about
experience.
Lisa, do you want to talk about what you're going to do in the new space that's different than what you're doing now?
Well, we're going to be able to really create the labyrinth, the idea of a flow. So if you draw your store's flow and you're like, this is what I intend to have happen. I want people to walk in. I want them to see, touch every single part of the store. So rather than thinking like a departmental store, we're thinking more like that museum. Rather than thinking we're going to send them to the puzzles or we're going to send them to whatever, we're really creating a discovery space. So we want them to meander. We want them to discover and to not miss any corner. Right now, when we do our heat map, we see people coming in and out. They're not really hitting the labyrinth. So they're coming in and hitting a portion of it. And we've tried various things with fixtures, and they're helping. But it's an incremental process. What I'm excited about is being able to be a little lighter. we're only 15 feet wide right now, which is really narrow. And it's hard to get much, and that's a common problem. A lot of people have 15 or 8, but even 18 is way different. And 23 is like, you've got the world. So, so if you can get
And the new space is 23 feet wide?
the new space starts out 15 and then goes quickly to 23 and is 23 for the rest of it. So we can create a real meandering path labyrinth that people can go through in minutes or hours, but they will not leave the store without seeing all of the store. I think that, if you go to Shakespeare and Company over in France, you feel compelled to see all of the store. So that's something that I've been really working with here, experimenting with here, is like we were just talking about with the beach reads. What's causing people to stop and turn? Because you can watch humans do the same thing over and over again. They really react to things. So that's what we're playing with. So in the new store, they'll walk in and to the immediate right will be something to play with. It's the equivalent of going to the nail salon and saying, pick your color, or it's a creative engagement. They will pick a fortune cookie and get a book genre, or they'll fill something out, or they'll put their favorite mysteries, but there'll be an interactive element right at the front. And then our story will be on the wall, and you can really see what we're about and why we're here, and that sense of local and what is this place. You notice in the best bread shops and other places, you can read their story on the wall a lot of times. We want that to be able to happen in books. And then there'll be a writer's corner and all kinds of other fun things. But in the children's area, will be much more cloistered, much more of a cozy nook for the children, which I'm going to like, because right now the children.
I remember at Cleo's in Oakland that he has it behind a hidden wall. You have to go through a secret passage to get to the kids' store.
Everything with kids.
And then how do you, as a, recommender and advisor, free advisor to many, many people who start bookstores, how do you deal with smaller bookstores like Brad's? Brad, how big is your bookstore?
We're 1,100 square feet.
Geez, I got the impression it was like a closet. That's bigger than I thought.
Yeah, we actually have 1,400 square feet, but the 400 square feet and back or so is used for other activities that Cinda's a notary public, and I have a sideline of doing blueprints, and so we use it for that. But I think our store is fundamentally different in that most of our customers walk in knowing what they want, and if we don't have it on the shelf, they have their phone in their hand and they go, "Okay, thanks." When we opened our store, we built it on doing special orders.
Mm-hmm.
And it's become harder and harder to do that because Amazon's so pervasive. We do get people that come in just to look around, and do a little bit of that, but a lot more of our customers are coming in just wanting to get something right then. And if they can't get it, they just go, "Thank you," and walk out the door. And you're, like, but. So we try to have everything we can possibly fit in our store that is moving here. And that's a challenge. I just was looking at the total units in books, and it's about 23,000. So we're like stuffed in here. Yeah. And we very seldom have more than 2 of anything because we get next day delivery from Ingram.
Right.
So, we order 3 times a week.
So Brad, and Lisa, let's have the 2 of you. How would you, if you were so inclined, convert your store to more of a experience and more of a community store? I know foot traffic's sort of an issue for you, but what would you do? I mean, and Lisa, what would you advise?
Well,
because you're competing with Amazon right now.
Yeah. Well, we're competing with I want it now is
immediacy. Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. And we do have, customers that we've cultivated over the years that, they know we're going to get it for them, and they just call us or whatever. We do a lot of that, and quite often our special orders are just as much as our restock when we order 3 times a week. And at a lot of it has to do with, we do about $20,000 a month in book sales. I don't know what you do, Lisa, but so
Yeah.
our sorry.
We couldn't hear you. Say that again, Lisa, or Sam. We lost.
That's
There.
to break even, we need to hit 11.5 a week. That's our break even point for sales. So, and we're hitting that, but we need, we have to have all the help. And what we keep finding is that when we're overstuffed, we don't sell as much, but that's our constituency. That's people coming in. And again, if you're looking at, I think it's very hard for us to compete in bookstores. And Steve, we said this in our workshops, that I don't think we're selling books. I think we're offering an experience. The transaction of selling books occurs much more easily on people's phones and other places. So if they're like, I've got this, I know what I need, that makes it really hard to succeed and to compete with. You have to have, a diver following that's going to. Are you on bookshop.org? Do you have a storefront there?
Yeah, we have a storefront there, and we also have an Indie Light.
So that's helpful. Right? So,
Yeah, so Sarah, do you have a question or a comment? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was noticing your concrete floor, because we have carpet that is getting old, and I've been thinking about it for a while, and I was just wondering about just not replacing the carpet, but getting rid of it. But you do have some runners.
Yeah, we do. We have a stained concrete floor that gives a nice feel. I think warmth is super important. But we do have carpet runners, which we, work clean. and in the children's area, we have Ruggables, which was my gift to the store at Christmas last year. And those are washable, which is
That's a nice idea. That's a good idea.
The Ruggables for children I love being able to wash them, and don't often as often as I should, but at least that possibility is there, and we get some. And in the new place, we'll have wood floors, which I adore wood floors. And you're right, the floors and the ceiling, all of it kind of create an atmosphere and an experience that get us out of, because we will, what at least we're finding is that we have a hard time when people come in, like you're describing, Brad, and they're like, I want this book. 2,800 books published every week, like having exactly the book is low. So we hope they come in and instead go, and they do. They say, like, you, and nice words, and they feel they book ladder, and we want them to slow down, slow their roll, breathe, and experience something here. And that's tricky because attention is hard to pull with people. But the events really help. Small events really help people slow down. We don't sell a lot at events, so they don't make us money, but they help create our experiences. And
events are a marketing activity, not a revenue producing activity.
Absolutely. They create a sense of connection and loyalty to other people, and with the store. And I do a book club called Bring a Book Club. They literally bring a book from home that they love, that we likely don't have, but they're excited about the books, and they share about the books, and that stimulates other people to say, I want that book. And so we get these sales out of that kind of activity. And that's all very small. So yeah.
Lisa, do you want to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're almost at the end. First of all, are there any more questions? Just either raise your hand. Yeah, Stacy, go ahead.
Kind of just getting back to the events question, because I was talking with a friend of mine who does marketing kind of stuff, and she was saying that for my goals, what I really want to aim for our events is to touch at least 3,000 people per month. That do you have any kind of like goals like that where you're like, for the purpose of marketing to bring people? Because my big problem is when people come in the store, they buy for the most part, but it's just letting them know that we exist. Is the events the main driver to let people know that you exist? In what other ways are, like, we don't have a local paper, that kind of thing?
Well, I do a lot of public speaking. So I'm out talking to all the Rotary clubs and the schools, and we go out into the schools and we do library people. I'm not even counting those as events. So we've been working with the librarians, all the librarians in the schools, helping them work on display. And those are marketing activities because they just help people be aware of us. Working through these community partners, like the book project I mentioned earlier with the little coloring book, that's a project of the Highlands Economic Partnership, which is the chamber. They're promoting plenty, and so the marketing, but the most important, the best marketing example in the country that I can think of is DJ Johnson and Baldwin's and Company, and I'm really benchmarking him because he's trying to hit those kind of numbers, and he's doing it through athletes and music stars and because again, we're fairly the heavy readers. We're trying to reach those that don't think of themselves as readers. And so he does a lot of author events with people who are not from the traditional literary world. And I think that's a really good plan.
I think we're gonna have him on either next time or within the next 2 or 3 weeks. He's really remarkable. He's in New Orleans, just so you know, and
Okay.
it's based on James Baldwin. The store is based on James Baldwin.
Well, and he tells there's an NPR article about him where he tells his story beautifully. And the reason I bring him up, what I aspire to do is to tell our story as beautifully as he tells his, which is why I did the video. I'm trying to work at it. And I didn't even include there, my grandmother, who is part of my why and my story and the name Plenty and the whole deal. So I think in marketing, events or otherwise, we have to always be in touch with our story. And I'm going to do a workshop next week just to work on telling our story, and doing that in a way that really invites people into it, because I think that's probably key, whether it's social media or events or however we're connecting with people. They want to connect with our story.
And we should probably end soon, but are there any other questions, first of all? Feel free. Lisa, do you want to talk? I mean, the conclusion in part from listening to you is extraordinary, the number of things you're doing and the number of people involved. But do you want to talk about privilege and understanding your own privilege and the power of that for a minute? Because I thought that was really inspiring when you discussed that. Because people think you're privileged. You have a factory. You have you got all this business experience. But so how does that apply to other people who don't have those things?
Well, none of us have everything, and all of us have something. So, and privilege is only problematic when we don't recognize that we have it. And so the question is, I love Donald Clifton and his strengths test, because he really has this idea that we get farther faster by leaning into our strengths than by trying to focus on our weaknesses. And I think the same thing applies for all of us in terms, we've all got assets. We've all got, some of us have families, some of us don't. Some of us have community connections. Some of us have backgrounds in social work. My background happened to be in manufacturing and psychology. And and the biggest asset of all is that I have a relationship with Dave, and having a partnership or a relationship where you can count on somebody and you're aligned is a superpower. I mean, it's a real privilege to get to do that. And then just looking around and saying, what are your assets? What are the things that you can build out of and you can do, because we've all got them. We started with nothing and clawed our way here, and we still don't have a lot financially, but we have a lot going on. And it's really because we don't really want a lot financially. We want to help the community and spur that on. So if you're clear about what it is that you desire, that like Buddhist, if you're clear about what it is that you desire, what it is that you want, um, and then you look around and look at the assets that you have and build on those. I find that an invigorating way to start the day every day.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
mean, it would be interesting for us to all do a workshop together on each store's tree, because the tree really impressed me in terms of how many limbs you have out there. And I think, that is a challenge for small businesses to get your nose above the daily grind and to say, what else do I have and what else can I do and how can I do it with my limited resources? And you and I keep banging on about that, but it really is key. Because, like, for instance, for Brad, nothing personal, but I'd love to see if you began to develop more of a community side to your store while you're still delivering and competing with Amazon. It's like a really interesting.
Oh, yeah, we do a ton of stuff in the community. I've been the president of the Downtown Association, Chamber of Commerce, Cinda's on Leadership Morgan Hill. We have Booksmart Community Advantage, our nonprofit arm that does 2 or 3 programs a year. We do a ton of stuff in the community, and
Yeah.
we're very, very often in the paper. Now we're trying to do more of those small things out front of the store with local authors. And
I know my favorite part of your story is that you do author events on the sidewalk, which I think is a great technique.
well, but Brad, you just said a mouthful there. I mean, you got a nonprofit, you got all kinds of,
Yeah.
and that's true of all of us. We've all got these layers, and
sure.
and are all trying to do good things, and we're sort of feeling our way through and experimenting. And I guess that's the biggest underscore here, is that this is just a great big laboratory of of human intervention and hope and health.
Yeah, and even one of the things Brad told me a while ago that I thought was fascinating is that he's pioneering some work or paying attention to pioneers who are working on the economic impact in a town or in even a mall of a bookstore, because bookstores are more important. Look at that. Already he's reaching out to the community.
Yeah, it's already there's
hanging up on one more salesman. And
And
robocall.
that's
Yeah, I think the big we wouldn't be here if we weren't well connected to the community. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
My hope is that as Cinda and I both approach 70, that we can convert our business to a complete co-op or nonprofit of some sort, and actually have the community help us buy a permanent home for the store and be able to leave a legacy here in the community. And that's something we've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah, wonderful.
A lot on that kind of thing. And there are some playbooks for the hybrid, and then a white paper that just came out that I'll have access to, that is interesting about the nonprofit and your quest. What a beautiful quest, Brad, to do. And I think it's something that every community needs. And the bookstore uniquely is a community asset. And we didn't talk about that. The up there, are pictures of all the businesses that we hope to impact by being in this space. And one of the things that we're measuring is how much these are specific businesses. So there's Crawdaddy's, and there's Glass Tangerine and Vertical Coffee. And anyway, we're trying to see how big an economic lift we can give to those other businesses by being here. And it helps. It's just another way of underscoring how important a bookstore is in a community, and of making the case why a community should be interested in owning your store, Brad, long term. And we say this tree was planted in public soil. It belongs to everybody.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thought. We should move on and let people go, but this has been fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, all the rest of you too.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Sarah, thank you. Let's see what we can do
always
next
bringing
month.
interesting things.
Oh yeah. Next, we'll go to a bookstore that has no books. That'll be next week. Next month. No, I'm kidding. Okay, take care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.